Steve Scalise just mentioned the timeline here, and I wonder if you can bring us up to date on what's happening. This idea of being assembled in the Budget Committee tomorrow, Rules Committee Monday, floor vote before Memorial Day weekend. Is this sliding?
Look, those are the goals, and we'll have to see what happens tomorrow, particularly with the budget. This is new news that there may be enough members in the Budget Committee to not allow for it to pass. So that obviously would mess up the timetable. However, we had a very good meeting in Ways and Means this week. We were able to pass the tax portion of the bill. We were able to extend the Trump tax cuts from 2017. We were able to reinstate things like research and development, bonus depreciation, and other measures that are so important to the business community. And in that, we also did triple the SALT deduction for middle-class families while also preserving the corporate SALT for property taxes and income taxes, which was very critical for New York City. And so we feel like we've come together to get this measure out of the House Ways and Means Committee, which was a huge hurdle, as you know. And also the Energy and Commerce Committee passed their portion. And those were the two biggest items in this entire big, beautiful bill. So we'll have to get it through budget next. And I think that we will eventually do that.
Well, and when we consider the Energy and Commerce Committee, that is of course, where Medicaid cuts were finalized, part of the pay-fors, the spending cuts, if you will, to help offset some of these tax policies. We heard from the Speaker today that if the SALT cap is to be raised higher than $30,000, that you're going to have to find offsets for that. And I wonder, Congresswoman, if your colleagues in the SALT caucus are successful in getting this above $30K, what you're expecting to happen in return?
Well, look, I think there's different options here. I think the idea here is to live within the parameters that we've been given. SALT right now is roughly, it's about $215 billion. We want to stay within that piece. Now, that may mean we need to adjust the dials. Maybe instead of 10 years, it's for a 5-year period. Maybe we have to adjust the income levels. Maybe there's a phase out. You know, there's different things that we can do to still stay more or less within the amount that was provided for the SALT relief. And so we're still working that out. Obviously, we've fought very hard to stop certain cuts to Medicaid, particularly the lowering of the reimbursement rate that New York receives, which is currently 50% federal match. We were able to successfully stop per capita caps also on Medicaid, and so we don't want to budge there. We want to see how we can work within the tax space to find the savings to provide the SALT number that will not only satisfy the SALT caucus members, but as I like to call the other side, the low sodium diet members.
Okay. You know, Congresswoman, we've been talking about SALT with you here on Bloomberg TV and radio for years. And this morning, while speaking at the Economic Club of Washington, we heard from the chair of your Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Jason Smith of Missouri, about the status of this debate and why it's so difficult. Here's what he said.
It's not everything that some of the SALT members want, but I have members of our conference that doesn't even think you should be able to deduct $1, let alone $30,000, but it's a fair and balanced approach.
So with that said, Congresswoman, and I know that you're optimistic here to reach a deal, but if you did not, would you vote no to allow the cap to expire?
Well, in my situation, being a House Ways and Means member, I pushed very diligently to get to a number that would cover my district. And the tripling of the deduction to $30,000 covers 98% of my district. Now, would I have liked a higher number? Sure. But it's not what you want, it's what you need. That's how this works when you're working with so many other people who represent very different districts. And so I'm proud of the work that I did on this committee to get to where we are. If my colleagues and I can get a little more so they also can be covered in their particular districts, because we've got to remember, they're advocating for their districts. What may be good for me in Staten Island and Brooklyn may not necessarily work in Long Island or Westchester, where there's a higher property taxes. And so we got to come to a resolution here, and I think we'll get there. But again, you don't always get what you want, you get what you need.
Sure, but if you don't get a SALT deal, would you vote no?
We're going to get a SALT deal. Well, look, my 30,000's in there, so it'll be in there. That has already been approved by Ways and Means. That's the lowest it can be at this time, and I'm happy with the 30 for my district, but I do also want to support my colleagues who have districts with higher property taxes, and they need a little bit of a better number.
When we consider the timeline here, Congressman, obviously we began this conversation with questions as to whether the actual budget and rules, procedural steps may be delayed here. Knowing that you're up against a deadline to raise the debt ceiling that the Treasury Secretary says realistically needs to happen by mid-July, do you see a chance here that House Republicans might have to separate the debt ceiling hike out of reconciliation and work with Democrats to make sure that gets done while you work out all the difficulties on subject matters like this?
Look, absolutely, that could always be a possibility. That's why I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Republicans and half Democrats who are centrists that want to come together to solve problems in that type of situation. Hopefully, we can do this with just the Republicans. Let's take advantage of our trifecta and deliver real results that will help working families, American workers, as well as our businesses and children. We have the opportunity here to do so much. Our senior citizens are going to see reduced taxes. We're doubling the child tax credit. We're doubling the standard deduction, increasing it as well. And we're going to be delivering significant results here for all of America. But if we have to negotiate with the Democrats, what happens is, those tax brackets may very well change. They want to see increases on Americans. They do not want to do a lot of the things that we want to see happen, particularly when it comes to senior citizens and children with families. They've voted against a lot of these ideas in the past. And so we have to make sure that we just get this finished. And hopefully the first option here is to try to pass it on our own. But if we have to work with the Democrats, I'm prepared to do that as a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Yeah. Well, I know you had an important family meeting today, House Republicans behind closed doors with the Speaker, Congresswoman. I don't know who was loudest in that meeting, but is the Freedom Caucus what's standing between you and passage of this bill?
No, I think it's a few members from all factions. I mean, people have some outstanding concerns. And again, I understand it. We're all here trying to fight to get the best for our districts. But at some point, we have to say, you know what, we got what we can. And we're gonna do what's in the best interest of the country, and certainly passing this agenda to secure the borders, to ramp domestic energy production, to keep these across-the-board tax cuts that, if they expire, will be a $4 trillion increase on this country. It'll hurt our economy. Think what happens then to the markets if we were to allow this to happen. So it can't expire. We have to do our job, and we need to enhance these tax cuts and deliver on the president's promises, and also our commitment to the American people to put more money in their pocket and root out waste, fraud, and abuse. We can get it done, and we have to, because the consequences, I think, would be dire.